Part 7. Aftermath and Understanding. 3 months later, Danny woke in a medical facility that smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. For a moment he panicked. Where was he? Where was his crew? Were they safe? Then he saw Lily sitting in a chair beside his bed, reading something on a data pad. She looked up and smiled. "Welcome back." "How long?" His voice was rough from disuse. 3 months, 2 weeks, 4 days. "You've been in a medically induced coma while your body healed." Lily set down her pad and moved closer. "The rescue ship arrived 6 hours after you lost consciousness. They stabilized you and transferred you here, to the Galactic Medical Center on New Geneva." Danny tried to process that. 3 months. He'd been unconscious for 3 months. "The crew?" he asked. "Everyone survived. Zixthar is back with their family. Kriva returned to her navigation post. Greg's working on a new ship. Charnel went back to diplomatic duties." Lily paused. "We all come visit you once a week. Today's my day." "The Skrell?" "Gone. After the explosion and the fight at the medical bay, the remaining raiders fled. They haven't been seen in the outer terminus since. Word got around about what happened, about you." Danny tried to sit up. Pain flared through his body. Duller than before. Manageable, but still present. Lily helped him adjust the... Jake Morrison stared at the message on his screen for the 3rd time that morning. He couldn't believe what he was reading. The words seemed impossible, like someone was playing an elaborate joke on him. But the authentication codes were real. The diplomatic seals were genuine. This was actually happening. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Catherine Wells said as she walked into his small office. She was his supervisor at the orbital platform. A woman in her 50s who had spent 30 years in diplomatic service. Nothing surprised her anymore. But when Jake turned the screen toward her, he saw her eyes go wide. "Is this real?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Catherine leaned closer, reading the message carefully. Her lips moved silently as she processed each word. When she finished, she straightened up and let out a long breath. "The Zetharian Empire doesn't send fake messages. This is as real as it gets." Jake felt his stomach twist into knots. The message was simple but earth-shattering. Queen Lysara of the Zetharian Empire requested his presence for a private audience. Him, Jake Morrison, a 42-year-old diplomat who spent most of his days filing reports and attending boring meetings about trade regulations. "Why me?" Jake asked. "I'm nobody special. I've never even been to Zetharian space." Catherine shook her head slowly. "I have no idea. In 200 years of human contact with the Zetharians, only 5 people have ever been granted an audience with the Queen. All of them were heads of state or military leaders. You're a level 3 diplomat." "Maybe there's been a mistake," Jake suggested hopefully. "The Zetharians don't make mistakes like this," Catherine replied. She sat down in the chair across from his desk, her expression troubled. "They're the oldest civilization in the known galaxy. They've had faster-than-light travel for over 10,000 years. If Queen Lysara wants to see you specifically, there's a reason." Jake ran his hand through his dark hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "What do I do?" "You go," Catherine said firmly. "You don't turn down an invitation from the Zetharian Queen. That would be a diplomatic disaster. But what does she want with me? That's what you're going to find out." Catherine stood up and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'll approve your travel authorization immediately. Take Kevin Price with you as your assistant. He's smart and knows how to keep his mouth shut." Kevin Price was 28 years old and had been working at the diplomatic station for 3 years. When Jake told him about the summons an hour later, Kevin's reaction was more excitement than fear. "Are you serious? We're going to meet the Zetharian Queen?" Kevin's eyes were bright with enthusiasm. "Do you know how many people would kill for this opportunity?" "I'd happily let them have it," Jake muttered. "I don't understand why she wants to see me." "Maybe you did something impressive without realizing it," Kevin suggested. "Or maybe someone recommended you." "I file reports about shipping routes, Kevin. That's not impressive." Kevin shrugged. "Well, we're about to find out what this is all about." The next 2 days were a blur of preparations. Jake had to get medical clearance, security briefings, and diplomatic protocols drilled into his head. The Zetharians were formal and precise in all their dealings. One wrong gesture or word could cause offense. Remember, the protocol officer told him. Never look directly into all 4 of the Queen's eyes at once. That's considered an aggressive challenge. Keep your gaze lowered respectfully. Jake nodded, trying to memorize everything. There were rules about how to stand, how to speak, even how to breathe in the presence of Zetharian royalty. It was overwhelming. Finally, they boarded the small diplomatic shuttle that would take them to Zethara Prime, the throne world of the Empire. The ship was cramped but functional, with 2 small sleeping quarters and a tiny galley. The journey would take 3 days at maximum speed. As Earth fell away behind them, Jake felt his anxiety growing. He stood at the viewing port, watching the stars streak past as the ship's faster-than-light drive engaged. Somewhere out there in the vast darkness of space, an alien queen was waiting for him. Can't sleep either? Kevin's voice came from behind him. Jake turned to see his assistant standing in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. My mind won't shut off, Jake admitted. I keep running through every possible reason she might want to see me, and none of them make sense. Kevin handed him one of the cups. I've been doing research on Queen Lysara. She's ruled the Zetharian Empire for over 200 years. Some sources say she's much older than that, but their records from before human contact are hard to access. What else did you find? She's considered one of the most brilliant strategic minds in the galaxy. During the Confluence Wars 300 years ago, she personally negotiated peace between 7 different species. She's also supposed to be incredibly private. She rarely appears in public and almost never grants personal audiences. That doesn't make me feel better, Jake said. Kevin smiled slightly. I also found something interesting. In the last 50 years, the Zetharian Empire has been quietly withdrawing from several border regions. They're not at war with anyone. They're just pulling back. Some analysts think they're going through some kind of internal crisis. Jake considered this. You think that's why she wants to see me? Something to do with their internal problems? Maybe. Or maybe it's something else entirely. We won't know until we get there. The 3 days passed slowly. Jake spent most of his time reviewing everything humanity knew about the Zetharians. They were a humanoid species, but taller and more slender than humans, with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces. Their skin could change color based on their emotions, displaying beautiful patterns of bioluminescence. They were technologically superior to humanity in almost every way, but they rarely shared their knowledge. The Zetharians had discovered Earth about a century ago, just as humanity was beginning to explore beyond their own solar system. The first contact had been peaceful but distant. The Zetharians seemed to view humans the way humans might view interesting insects, worth observing but not worth serious engagement. In the 100 years since, relations had been polite but cool. That's what made this summons so strange. Why would the queen of such a powerful empire want to meet with an ordinary human diplomat? On the 3rd day, the ship's computer announced their approach to Zethara Prime. Jake and Kevin rushed to the viewing port to get their first glimpse of the legendary world. What they saw took Jake's breath away. The planet was beautiful beyond description. Instead of the gray and brown of industrial worlds, Zethara Prime glowed with soft colors. The cities looked like they had been grown rather than built, with flowing organic shapes that seemed to merge seamlessly with the natural landscape. Massive towers reached toward the sky, their surfaces covered in what looked like living crystal that caught and reflected the light of the system's twin suns. It's incredible, Kevin whispered. The shuttle received landing coordinates and began its descent. They were directed to a landing pad near the largest structure on the planet, a massive palace that seemed to be made entirely of translucent crystal. As they got closer, Jake could see that the crystal was actually alive somehow, pulsing gently with internal light. The ship touched down with barely a bump. Jake took a deep breath and stood up. I guess this is it. You'll do fine, Kevin said, though he sounded nervous too. The hatch opened and warm air rushed in, carrying strange scents that Jake couldn't identify. He stepped out onto the landing pad with Kevin right behind him. A group of Zetharian guards waited for them. They were even taller than Jake had expected, nearly 7 feet tall with skin that shimmered with patterns of blue and silver light. One of the guards stepped forward. Jake Morrison? The voice was deep and musical, speaking perfect English. That's me, Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. You are expected. Follow us. They were led into the palace through doors that seemed to open by themselves. The interior was just as magnificent as the exterior. The walls glowed softly, providing light without any visible source. The floors were smooth and warm beneath their feet. Everything seemed to hum with quiet energy. They walked through long corridors, passing other Zetharians who stopped to watch them pass. Jake could feel their eyes on him, could see the patterns shifting on their skin. He didn't need to speak their language to understand their expressions. Curiosity, confusion, some disdain. Humans were still newcomers here, barely worth notice. Finally, they reached a large antechamber. The guards gestured for them to wait. "The Queen will summon you when she is ready," one of them said. Then they were alone. The room was comfortable but clearly meant to impress. The walls displayed what looked like scenes from Zetharian history, battles and celebrations and moments of great importance. Jake sat down on a bench that seemed to form itself from the floor, adjusting its shape to fit him perfectly. "How long do you think we'll wait?" Kevin asked. "As long as she wants us to," Jake replied. It turned out to be 6 hours, 6 long hours of sitting and waiting with nothing to do but think about what was coming. Jake's nervousness grew with each passing minute. What could the Queen possibly want? What if he said something wrong? What if he caused some kind of diplomatic incident? Finally, the doors at the far end of the chamber began to open. They moved silently, revealing a... Jake barely slept that night. The quarters the Zetharians provided were more luxurious than anywhere he'd ever stayed. The bed adjusted itself to his body perfectly. The temperature was ideal and the room was absolutely silent. But his mind wouldn't stop racing. He kept replaying the conversation with Queen Lysara over and over, trying to make sense of it all. Kevin had asked a dozen questions when Jake emerged from the throne room. But Jake could only shake his head and say that the Queen had sworn him to secrecy. Kevin looked hurt and confused, but he'd accepted it. Now he was asleep in the adjacent room while Jake stared at the ceiling, watching the soft patterns of light that moved across it. An entire civilization was dying from the inside. They had everything anyone could want, and yet they'd lost the will to keep existing. How was that even possible? And what could Jake possibly say or do that would make a difference? He finally fell into an uneasy sleep just before dawn. What felt like minutes later, a soft chime woke him. A voice spoke from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Jake Morrison, the Queen will see you in 1 hour." Jake dragged himself out of bed and found that fresh clothes had been provided, laid out neatly on a chair. They were similar to his diplomatic uniform, but made from fabric that felt like silk and steel at the same time. He showered in a bathroom that seemed to clean him without water, just some kind of energy field that left him feeling refreshed. He dressed quickly and found Kevin already awake and eating breakfast in the common area of their quarters. "You look terrible," Kevin said. "Did you sleep at all?" "Not much," Jake admitted. He sat down and a plate of food appeared in front of him, rising up from the table itself. The food was strange but smelled good, some kind of fruit and bread that tasted better than anything he'd had before. "Can you at least tell me if everything went okay yesterday?" Kevin asked. Jake nodded. "It went fine. The Queen she's impressive, and she has questions for me, lots of them. I'll be meeting with her again this morning." "What kind of questions?" "I can't say. I'm sorry, Kevin, I know this is frustrating." Kevin sighed but nodded. "Okay, I trust you. Just be careful. These aliens are way more advanced than us. Don't let them manipulate you into something that could hurt Earth." Jake hadn't even considered that possibility, but Kevin was right to be cautious. What if the Queen had some hidden agenda? What if this was all some kind of elaborate trick? He pushed the thought aside. His instincts told him the Queen had been honest with him. She was desperate, and desperate beings told the truth when they had nothing left to lose. The same guards from yesterday arrived exactly on time to escort Jake back to the throne room. This time he knew what to expect, but the sheer beauty of the place still took his breath away. The living walls pulsed with light, and the crystal throne seemed to glow brighter than before. Queen Lysara was already seated, her 4 eyes tracking his approach. Jake bowed at the appropriate distance and waited. "Good morning. Jake Morrison." Her voice filled his mind, gentle but impossible to ignore. "I trust you rested well." "Well enough, Your Majesty." "Thank you for the hospitality. You are troubled. I can sense it. You are wondering if I am being truthful with you." Jake felt exposed. Could she read his mind beyond what she chose to project to him? "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I don't mean any disrespect. None taken. Skepticism is healthy. It shows intelligence. The patterns on her skin shifted to a warm gold color. Let me prove my honesty. I will show you something no human has ever seen. But you must promise never to speak of it to anyone. Can you make that promise? Jake felt his heart speed up. Yes, Your Majesty. I promise. The queen raised one hand and suddenly the walls of the throne room changed. The crystal became transparent, but instead of showing the palace outside, it showed scenes from across the Zetharian Empire. Jake saw cities that should have been bustling with activity sitting nearly empty. He saw massive structures crumbling from neglect. He saw Zetharians sitting alone in beautiful homes, staring at nothing, waiting to die. This is the truth of my empire, the queen said, her mental voice heavy with sorrow. The numbers we report to other civilizations are lies. We claim to have a population of 40 billion. The real number is closer to 20 billion now and falling every year. We claim our economy is strong. In truth, our production has fallen by 60% in the last century. We claim our military is unmatched. We couldn't fight a war if we needed to. The images continued to shift, showing the reality behind the facade. Jake felt sick to his stomach. If other civilizations found out the truth, they would tear the Zetharian Empire apart like wolves falling on a wounded deer. Why are you showing me this? Jake asked. Because you need to understand how serious this is. My people are not simply depressed. They are losing the very will to exist, and I don't know why. The images faded and the walls became solid crystal again.
I have spent decades studying this problem.
I have consulted with the greatest minds in the Empire. No one has answers. What changed? Jake asked. There must have been some point where things were different. The queen was silent for a long moment. That is the question I have been asking myself for years. I have gone back through our history, looking for the moment when we began to fade, and I believe I have found it. She gestured, and a new image appeared in the air between them. It showed a Zetharian city, but different from the ones Jake had seen before. This city was full of life and energy. Zetharians crowded the streets, their skin patterns bright and varied. This was our civilization 6,000 years ago, just before we achieved functional immortality. We had conquered disease, but not death itself. Zetharians still aged, still died of old age, and they lived with purpose because they knew their time was limited. The image shifted to show a different city, more advanced but somehow less vibrant. This is 5,000 years ago, after we had eliminated death from aging. Notice the difference? Jake studied the image carefully. The city was more beautiful, the technology more advanced, but there were fewer Zetharians visible, and those he could see moved slower, with less energy. The change was subtle at first, the queen continued. Birth rates began to drop. Not suddenly, just a slow decline. We didn't worry about it. Why would we? We had achieved immortality. We had all the time in the universe. More images flashed by, showing the slow decline of Zetharian civilization across thousands of years. But something happened that we didn't anticipate. When death was no longer a concern, life lost its urgency. When we had unlimited time, nothing seemed important anymore. Why create art today when you can do it tomorrow or next year or next century? Why form relationships when you'll have endless opportunities? Why have children when you yourself will live forever? The queen's patterns had turned a deep, sad blue. We achieved everything we wanted, Jake Morrison. We eliminated suffering and death and hardship, and in doing so, we eliminated meaning. We destroyed the very thing that made life worth living. Jake felt the weight of her words. It was a concept so alien to him that he struggled to grasp it. But surely not all of your people feel this way. There must be some who still want to live, to create, to grow. A few, the queen admitted. Mostly the very young, those who haven't yet experienced centuries of endless, unchanging existence. But even they fade eventually. The ennui is like a disease that spreads slowly but inevitably. She rose from her throne and approached Jake, moving with that strange, fluid grace. That is why I need to understand humans. Your species faces death constantly. Your lives are brief, fragile things that can be snuffed out in an instant. You should be paralyzed by fear, but instead you burn brighter because of it. You create art and music and literature knowing you'll barely have time to make a mark on history. You form deep bonds knowing you'll lose everyone you love eventually. You fight battles knowing you might not live to see victory. The queen stopped right in front of Jake, so close he could see the patterns shifting on her skin in complex cascades. Tell me, Jake Morrison, how do you bear it? How do you face the certainty of death and still find joy in living? Jake thought about her question carefully. It was probably the most important question anyone had ever asked him. "I think," he said slowly, "it's because death gives life meaning. We know our time is limited, so we try to make it count. Every day we wake up is a gift we didn't earn and don't deserve. So we try to fill it with as much as we can. But doesn't the knowledge that everything will end make everything pointless?" the Queen asked. "If you and everyone you love will die, if all your works will crumble to dust eventually, what is the purpose of any of it?" "The purpose is the living itself," Jake replied. "My grandmother used to say that life isn't about the destination, it's about the journey. We don't live to reach some final goal. We live because living is worthwhile in itself." The Queen's 4 eyes studied him intently. "But you must experience despair. There must be times when humans want to give up, when the weight of mortality becomes too much." "Of course," Jake admitted. "We get depressed. We lose hope sometimes, but most of us find a way back. We lean on each other. We find new reasons to keep going." "How?" The word came out almost like a plea. "How do you find those reasons?" Jake thought about all the stories he knew, all the people who'd overcome impossible odds. Jake took a deep breath before continuing. The Queen waited patiently, her 4 eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel like she was looking into his soul. He had to get this right. Everything depended on it. "Your Majesty, you've been studying humans from a distance, reading our history and analyzing our data. But I don't think you can really understand us that way. You need to hear our stories. Not the big historical events, but the personal stories, the individual moments that show what drives us." The Queen's patterns shifted to a curious silver color. "Very well. Tell me your stories, Jake Morrison." Jake thought about where to begin. So many stories, so many examples of human perseverance. He decided to start with something recent, something he'd witnessed himself. 3 years ago, I was assigned to the orbital station around Earth. There was another diplomat there, a woman named Amy Rodriguez. She was 65 years old, which is getting old for humans, though we can live longer now with medical advances." He paused, remembering Amy's tired face and determined eyes. Amy had spent the last 30 years of her life working on a cure for something we called the Titan Plague. It was a disease that showed up in the colonies on Saturn's moon Titan. The disease didn't kill you quickly. It slowly destroyed your nervous system over years, causing incredible pain. Thousands of people suffered from it. "And this Amy Rodriguez sought to cure it?" the Queen asked. "Yes, but it wasn't easy. The disease was complicated, and funding for research was limited. Amy had to fight for every credit, every resource. She worked 16-hour days, sometimes longer. Her husband left her because she was never home. Her children grew up barely knowing her. She bankrupted herself paying for research when official funding dried up. Jake felt emotion rising in his throat. People told her to give up. They said the disease was too complex, that she was wasting her life. But Amy kept going. Year after year, failure after failure, she kept working. "Why?" the Queen asked simply. "Because people were suffering and she thought she could help them." She told me once that every night when she went to sleep, she thought about all the people in pain, all the families watching their loved ones deteriorate. She said she couldn't live with herself if she didn't try everything possible to save them. "And did she succeed?" Jake nodded, feeling a smile cross his face. "Yes, in her 65th year she finally cracked it. She found the cure. Within 6 months they were producing it in large quantities. Within a year the Titan Plague was nearly eliminated. Amy saved thousands of lives. A triumphant story, the Queen said. But it only proves that humans can be stubborn and driven by compassion. I already knew this." "That's not the end of the story," Jake continued. "Amy died 2 years later. All those years of stress and overwork had damaged her heart. She barely got to enjoy her success before it killed her." The Queen's pattern shifted to a dark blue. Then her sacrifice was pointless. She gave everything and received almost nothing in return. "No," Jake said firmly. "That's where you're wrong. Amy told me something before she died. She said that she had no regrets. Every sacrifice was worth it because she'd made a difference. She said that knowing her work would continue to save lives long after she was gone gave her peace. She found meaning in the struggle itself, not in the reward." Jake could see the patterns on the Queen's skin swirling faster, processing what he'd said. "Tell me another story." So Jake told her about the last stand on Europa, about Commander Lisa Grant and her 50 soldiers, who held off an attack from alien raiders for 3 days with weapons that were 30 years out of date. They'd known they couldn't win, Known they would all die, but they'd fought anyway to give the civilian colonists time to evacuate. All 50 soldiers died, but 2,000 civilians lived. Then he told her about Peter Yang, an engineer who'd spent 40 years designing better food production systems for space colonies. Peter never became famous, never got rich, never received awards, but his systems had made life better for millions of people living on stations and colonies throughout the solar system. Peter had died quietly at age 78, satisfied that he'd spent his life doing useful work. Jake told story after story. About teachers who spent their lives educating children. About doctors who worked in dangerous colonies for low pay. About artists who created beauty, knowing their work might never be appreciated. About ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply because they believed it mattered. The Queen listened to every word, her patterns constantly shifting through colors Jake was beginning to recognize as deep concentration. After he'd been talking for what felt like hours, she finally raised a hand to stop him. Enough. I begin to understand something. She stood and walked to one of the crystal walls looking out over her empire. All these stories have a common element. Your people find meaning through connection, through helping others, creating for others, sacrificing for others. They are willing to suffer if that suffering serves a purpose beyond themselves. Yes, Jake agreed. We're social creatures. We need each other. And that need drives us to do things that might seem irrational from a purely individual perspective. But what about those who have no one? The Queen asked, turning back to face him. What drives humans who are alone, who have no connections? Jake thought about that carefully. Even people who are alone usually believe in something. They have ideals or causes or dreams. My grandfather lived alone in the mountains for the last 20 years of his life, but he spent that time writing a history of Earth's colonization period. He knew hardly anyone would read it, but he believed that preserving that history was important. He needed to feel like his life had purpose, even if no one else recognized it. Purpose, the Queen repeated. That word appears often in your stories. Humans seek purpose the way my people once sought knowledge. Don't your people have purpose? Jake asked. Surely they have things they care about, things they want to accomplish. The Queen's patterns turned almost black. That is the problem. They have lost the ability to care. When you have infinite time and infinite resources, when every need is met and every want can be fulfilled, purpose becomes meaningless. Why do anything when you can do everything eventually? Why care about anything when nothing truly matters? She moved closer to Jake again. I will tell you a story now. One that I have told no one. Not even my closest advisors. Perhaps you will understand what it means. Jake felt honored and terrified at the same time. I'm listening, Your Majesty. 200 years ago, when I was young, I fell in love. His name was Korath, and he was a poet, one of the last great artists our civilization produced. We spent a century together. He wrote thousands of poems about our love, about the beauty of existence, about the joy of creation. He was famous throughout the empire. His words moved people in ways nothing else could. The Queen's voice in Jake's mind was heavy with old grief. And then one day he simply stopped. Stopped writing, stopped speaking, stopped moving. He sat in our garden for weeks, staring at nothing. I begged him to tell me what was wrong. Finally, he said something I will never forget. He said, I have written every combination of words that matters. I have expressed every feeling that exists. There is nothing new left to create. I am finished. What happened to him? Jake asked softly. He willed himself to stop existing. His body simply shut down cell by cell over the course of a month, and I could do nothing to prevent it. He had decided that life held nothing more for him, and so he ended it. Jake felt tears pricking at his eyes. I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. Do not pity me, the Queen said, though her patterns remained dark. Pity my entire species because Korath was not unique. Millions have made the same choice. They have seen everything, done everything, experienced everything. They have run out of reasons to continue. But there's always something new, Jake protested. Always something different to experience or create or learn. Is there? The Queen asked. When you have lived for thousands of years, when you have perfect memory and unlimited time, novelty becomes impossible. Everything becomes a variation on what came before. Nothing truly surprises. Nothing truly excites. The universe becomes dull and predictable. Jake thought about what she was saying. It was hard to imagine. His life had been full of new experiences, surprises, challenges. But he'd only lived 42 years. What would it be like after 1,000? After 10,000? Maybe the problem isn't that your people have lived too long, Jake said slowly, working through the idea as he spoke. Maybe the problem is that they've lost their sense of connection to each other and to something bigger than themselves. Explain, the Queen commanded. Well, you said Korath felt like he'd written every combination of words that mattered. But words matter because of how they affect other people, right? A poem isn't valuable by itself. It's valuable because it moves someone who reads it, because it creates a connection between the poet and the reader. Jake's excitement grew as the idea crystallized. Maybe Korath stopped caring about his poetry because he stopped caring about the people who would read it. Maybe your entire civilization has the same problem. You're all so focused on individual experience and achievement that you've forgotten you're part of something bigger. The Queen's patterns shifted rapidly through a sequence of colors, Jake. The Queen moved away from Jake, her tall form gliding across the throne room floor. The patterns on her skin had settled into a deep purple color that Jake hadn't seen before. Something had shifted in the conversation, and he could feel the weight of it in the air. Before we proceed further with your proposal, the Queen said, her mental voice taking on a grave tone, there is something more you must understand, something that could destroy both our civilizations if it becomes known. Jake felt his heart rate increase. What is it, Your Majesty? The Queen was silent for a long moment, and Jake realized she was struggling with something, making a decision about whether to tell him. Finally, she spoke. What I am about to share with you could shatter galactic politics. It is the deepest secret of the Zetharian Empire, known only to myself and a handful of advisors. If other civilizations discover the truth, they will fall upon us like predators. Do you understand the responsibility I'm placing on you? Yes, Your Majesty. I swear I will keep your secret. See that you do. Your life may depend on it. Many lives may depend on it. The Queen turned to face him, all four eyes locking onto his. The Zetharian Empire, as it exists in the eyes of the galaxy, is a fiction, a carefully maintained illusion. Jake felt cold dread creeping through him. What do you mean? Our military power, which has kept peace in this region of space for thousands of years, is ceremonial at best. We have ships, yes. Beautiful advanced vessels that look impressive during parades and demonstrations, but half of them are not even functional. We lack the personnel to crew them properly, and those we do have are undertrained and unmotivated. If we were attacked tomorrow by any mid-level military power, we would collapse within weeks. The Queen's patterns had turned almost black. Our economy, which supposedly produces more goods than any other civilization in this sector, is stagnant. Our factories produce at a fraction of their capacity. Our workers show up and go through the motions, but there is no drive, no innovation, no progress. We import more than we produce now, trading on our reputation and our ancient wealth. She moved to one of the crystal walls and pressed her hand against it. The wall became transparent and Jake could see out over the city below. From this distance it looked magnificent, a sprawling metropolis of elegant structures and flowing designs. But as the Queen magnified the view, Jake began to see the cracks. Buildings with lights that didn't work, streets that were empty when they should be full, gardens that had grown wild from neglect. Our infrastructure is crumbling, the Queen continued. We have technology that could repair everything automatically, but even our maintenance systems are failing because no one cares enough to oversee them properly. In another century, maybe less, this beautiful city will be ruins, and my people will simply sit among the ruins watching everything fall apart, too tired to care. Jake stared at the scene, horrified. How long has this been happening? The decline began slowly, perhaps 2,000 years ago, but it has accelerated dramatically in the last 5 centuries. We have hidden it well. We carefully control what other civilizations see of us. We maintain the appearance of strength and prosperity, but it is only an appearance. The wall became opaque again, hiding the dying city. The Queen turned back to Jake. Do you understand now why your proposal is not just interesting to me, but absolutely critical? I am not trying to enrich my civilization. I am trying to save it from extinction. If we cannot find a way to rekindle the will to live in my people, the Zetharian Empire will cease to exist within a few generations. What would happen? Jake asked. If the Empire fell? Chaos, the Queen said simply. The Zetharian Empire has maintained peace in this region of space for thousands of years. We have been the stabilizing force, the neutral arbiter of disputes, the power that prevents smaller civilizations from warring with each other. If we fall, there will be a power vacuum. Wars will break out. Species will be conquered or destroyed. The entire galactic order will collapse into violence. Jake felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. This wasn't just about helping one dying civilization. It was about preventing a catastrophe that would affect billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. And humanity? Jake asked. Where would we fit into all this chaos? The Queen's pattern shifted to a dark red. That is the terrible irony, Jake Morrison. Humanity, young and ambitious and hungry, would likely be one of the primary beneficiaries of our collapse. With the Zetharian Empire gone, human expansion would face fewer restrictions. You could claim territory, gather resources, establish yourselves as a major power. The fall of my civilization would likely mark the rise of yours. I don't think most humans would want that, Jake said. Not if it meant the suffering of billions of innocent beings. Perhaps not, the Queen agreed. But it would happen anyway. That is the nature of power vacuums. They get filled by whoever is strong enough and ambitious enough to claim them. And humans, as you have shown me, are both strong and ambitious. She moved closer to him again. But there is another possibility. A darker one that you must understand. If the truth about our weakness becomes known before we can recover, there are civilizations that would not wait for us to fall naturally. They would attack, seeking to claim our territory and technology for themselves. And humanity, being close allies with us through this exchange program, would be caught in the crossfire. Jake felt sick. You're saying that by helping you, we might be putting ourselves in danger? Yes. If our enemies discover our weakness and attack, they will also target your species to prevent you from inheriting our position. You would be destroyed simply for being associated with us. The Queen's voice held genuine regret. I tell you this because you deserve to know the full truth. Your proposal could save my people, but it also puts your own species at risk. You must decide if that risk is acceptable. Jake's mind raced. This was so much bigger than he'd imagined. He was just a diplomat, not qualified to make decisions that could affect the fate of humanity. But the Queen had chosen him, and now he had to see it through. Why me? Jake asked suddenly. You still haven't really explained why you summoned me specifically. Surely there are more qualified humans who could help you with this. The Queen's patterns shifted to that curious silver color again. Do you truly not know? No, I'm nobody special. That is precisely why I chose you, the Queen said. I did not want a politician who would see this situation as an opportunity to gain advantage. I did not want a military leader who would view us as potential enemies. I did not want a scientist who would be interested only in our technology. I wanted someone ordinary, someone who would understand my people's suffering on a personal level and respond with genuine compassion rather than calculation. She reached out and touched the side of Jake's head gently. I scanned the records of thousands of human diplomats. I read their files, studied their histories, analyzed their personality profiles.
And I found you.
Jake Morrison, a man who has never sought power or glory, who does his job quietly and competently, who treats everyone with respect regardless of their status, a man who, when his colleague was dying, sat with her for hours just to ensure she wasn't alone at the end. Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. He'd thought no one had noticed that. Amy Rodriguez had been dying, and everyone else had been too busy or too uncomfortable to visit. So Jake had gone every day, just sitting with her, talking, or sometimes just being present. You have a good heart, Jake Morrison, the Queen said softly. That is rarer than you might think, especially among beings with power and influence. I needed someone with a good heart for this task, someone who would see my people as people, not as opportunities or threats. I don't know if my heart is good enough for this, Jake admitted. This is so big, Your Majesty. What if I make the wrong choice? What if I say yes to the exchange program and it leads to disaster? Then we will face that disaster together, the Queen replied. But if you say no, disaster is certain. My people will fade away, the empire will fall, and chaos will follow. At least your proposal offers hope. Jake took a deep breath. He thought about his grandmother Linda, walking 40 miles in a failing pressure suit because giving up wasn't an option. He thought about Amy Rodriguez, spending 30 years fighting a disease because people needed help. He thought about all the stories of humans refusing to surrender even when the odds seemed impossible. All right, Jake said finally. I'll do it. I'll help you set up the exchange program, but I need some guarantees. Name them. First, the Zetharians who come to human worlds must be treated with respect and kindness. They're going to struggle, and that's the point, but we won't let them suffer unnecessarily or be exploited. Agreed. Second, humanity gets access to some of your technology. Nothing military, but medical advances, environmental technologies, things that will improve lives without giving us weapons we might misuse. Reasonable, agreed. Third, you work with me to gradually prepare both our species for the truth. This secret can't stay hidden forever. Eventually, we need to find a way to reveal the Zetharian Empire situation in a way that doesn't cause panic or invite attack. The Queen was quiet for a moment. That will be difficult and dangerous. But yes, I agree. We cannot live in deception forever. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of meetings, planning sessions, and careful negotiations. Jake spent his days with Queen Lysara and her closest advisors, working out the details of what they were calling the Cultural Exchange Initiative. His nights were spent briefing Kevin on what he could share, which wasn't much, and sending carefully worded reports back to Catherine Wells. The Queen had been right about one thing. Convincing human authorities to go along with the program without revealing the truth was tricky. Jake had to present it as an opportunity for humanity to learn from the advanced Zetharians, a generous offer from the Queen to help guide humanity's development. Catherine and the other diplomats were thrilled. They saw it as recognition of humanity's growing importance in galactic affairs. If they only knew the truth, Jake thought more than once. But he kept his promise to the Queen. The planning sessions were intense. They had to decide how many Zetharians would participate in the first wave, which human worlds they would visit, how long they would stay, and what exactly they would do while they were there. Every detail had to be carefully considered. They cannot simply observe, Queen Lysara insisted during one meeting. Observation is passive, detached. They must participate. They must struggle alongside humans, experience failure and frustration, learn what it means to strive for something difficult. Jake nodded. They were in a smaller conference room today, just the two of them. The Queen's advisors had initially been upset about being excluded, but she'd dismissed their concerns with a wave of her hand. Jake was beginning to understand that despite her civilization's decline, Lysara herself was still a force to be reckoned with. What about starting them off with something simple? Jake suggested. Have them work in regular jobs alongside humans. Factory work, agriculture, construction, physical labor that has clear goals and visible results. The Queen's patterns shifted to a thoughtful blue. My people have not done physical labor in thousands of years. We have machines for all such tasks, exactly. That's part of the problem, isn't it? When machines do everything, what's left for your people to do? What goals can they work toward? But surely you don't suggest we abandon our technology? That we return to primitive methods? No, Jake said quickly. Technology isn't the enemy. It's the loss of purpose that's the problem. Your people need to feel like they're contributing something, like their efforts matter. Physical work is one way to experience that. The Queen was quiet for a moment. You may be right, very well. We will start with manual labor. But we must be careful. Young Zetharians are not accustomed to hardship. Some may react badly. That's a risk we have to take, Jake said. If we make it too easy, they won't learn anything.